Arthur's family truth. It didn't start with anything big, it started in the break room. Marvin walked in while I was halfway through lunch, glanced at me, then stopped, not at me. At the earbuds in my ears, he set his coffee down slower than usual, walked over, stood there for a second, like he was deciding something. Then he pulled me aside. I took one earbud out, he didn't touch them, didn't point, just looked at them a little too long. Then he said something I wasn't expecting. I remember nodding, putting the earbud back in, and going back to work. I didn't call anyone. But the way he looked at them, like he recognized exactly what they were, that stayed with me. I told myself he was overthinking it. Marvin had done 20 years in the Army, communications hardware. But these were something my daughter bought online for $180. I'd seen the listing myself, clean website, reviews, photos, looked normal. There was no reason for it to be anything else, so I let it go. It was a birthday gift. Donna had saved for months to buy it. She never spent money on things like that. That's just who she was. My birthday fell on a Tuesday. I came home and there was a box waiting for me, nothing fancy. That wasn't her style. She slid it across the table and watched my face while I opened it. Inside, a pair of matte black earbuds. The exact kind I'd been looking at for almost 2 years. Inside, a pair of matte black earbuds. The exact kind I'd been looking at for almost 2 years. Donna? I said. This is too much. I found them on a clearance site, she said. Don't make it weird, Dad. You deserve something nice for once. I put them in right there at the table. The kitchen noise disappeared. The refrigerator hum, the traffic outside, all of it gone. Just quiet. I felt like a different person. I had no idea what I was putting in my ears. The days after my birthday were fine. Good, even. I wore the earbuds on the bus to work and on my lunch breaks, listening to history podcasts, catching up on audiobooks I'd been meaning to get to. Felt modern for the first time in a while. Meanwhile, the atmosphere at the warehouse was getting tense. Patrick Marsh, our regional director, had been locked in his office for most of the week, and I'd noticed security running random locker checks on the floor. I told myself it had nothing to do with me. I was wrong about that too. To understand why Patrick Marsh was able to do what he did, you have to understand what the warehouse looked like before he got there. I had worked that facility for 11 years. I knew every dock, every manifest, every face on the floor. We handled government freight, military supply contracts, sensitive logistics, the kind of work where you check everything twice and you don't cut corners because the paperwork follows you. I ran a tight operation. I checked every seal, flagged every discrepancy, and treated my crew like adults. In an industry full of people looking the other way, I was the guy who kept looking. Then corporate sent us Patrick Marsh. He showed up about 6 months before my birthday. Expensive suit, firm handshake, the kind of smile that doesn't reach his eyes. He talked constantly about efficiency and inventory liquidity, words that usually mean someone's about to start ignoring things they shouldn't ignore. Within 2 months of his arrival, I started noticing gaps. High-value electronics marked as damaged in transit, but never showing up in the scrap reports. Military-grade communications equipment coming in short on delivery counts. Small numbers at first, then bigger ones. I sent emails. I asked for clarification on missing shipments. Patrick always had the same answer. Counting lag, systems update, stop overthinking the numbers. Once he put his hand on my shoulder and said, "Relax, Roy. Worry about your retirement, not the inventory." I didn't understand what he meant by that until later. It wasn't advice, it was a warning. What I didn't know then, what the federal investigators told me weeks later, was that Columbus wasn't Patrick's first warehouse. He had run the same operation at 2 other distribution hubs before ours. Different cities, same playbook. Come in as the new director, establish control over receiving, create paper gaps in the inventory system, and when the numbers got too hard to explain, find someone already inside the building to pin it on. Someone with access, someone with credentials, someone who had been asking too many questions. He had been building a frame around me for months before my birthday ever arrived. I found that out too late. What I should have done, what I tell myself now in the middle of the night, is listen to Marvin. Marvin is 62. He spent 20 years in the Army as a communications technician, working on military radio and signals hardware before he moved into civilian logistics. He's the dock supervisor. Quiet guy, precise, the kind of man who doesn't say much because he doesn't waste words. I trusted him more than anyone else in that building. The day after my birthday, I wore the earbuds on my lunch break. I was in the break room, halfway through a podcast when Marvin walked in for coffee. He glanced over at me. Then he stopped. He set his mug down on the counter, walked over slowly, leaned in close enough that I could tell he didn't want anyone else to hear. "Roy," he said, "take those out, right now. You need to contact the police." I pulled one earbud out. "What are you talking about?" "I'm not joking." His voice was flat and steady. "I know that hardware. I worked with that exact model in my last 2 years of service. That is an ANPRC prototype, military-grade communications unit. It does not exist on the civilian market. It is not supposed to be outside a secure facility." I looked at him. Marvin doesn't joke. He's not excitable. But I looked at those earbuds and I thought, Donna bought these for $180 on a clearance website. There's no way. I told myself he was mixing it up with something similar, that maybe the design had been licensed out, that there had to be a reasonable explanation. "I'll look into it," I said. I took the earbuds out and put them in my jacket pocket, but I didn't call anyone. I went back to work. I told myself I'd check the product listing that evening and figure it out. I never got the chance. 4 days after Marvin's warning, the front door came off its hinges. I already told you what that looked like. I'll tell you what came after. A detective stayed behind once the squad car drove away. He picked the earbuds up off my end table with a gloved hand and dropped them into an evidence bag. Then he told me what they actually were, ANPRC.com's prototype. Stolen from a military shipment that my warehouse had been contracted to receive and secure. The units had built-in tracking hardware. That's how they found us. And Donna's credit card was tied to a black market site that federal agents had been monitoring for months. The site she bought them from, surplusgeards.com, wasn't a clearance operation. It was a front designed to look legitimate. SSL certificate, fake reviews, real-looking product photos, designed specifically to move stolen military hardware through people who had no idea what they were buying. My knees gave out. I sat down on the couch and stayed there for a long time after the detective left. The next morning I drove to the police station before sunrise. They wouldn't let me see Donna. "Federal jurisdiction now," they said. "Processing." I stood in that parking lot for 20 minutes before I could make myself drive to work. My badge didn't work at the employee entrance. Red light, access denied. One of Patrick's private security hires walked me to his office. Patrick was behind his desk, looking at a stack of papers like he was disappointed in all of them. He didn't offer me a seat. He told me that digital logs showed my login credentials accessing the secure cage where the military equipment had been stored. He said the paper trail pointed to me pulling the inventory and Donna moving it. He slid a termination agreement across the desk and told me to sign it. "Admit nothing," he said. "Just acknowledge his cause, sign it, and maybe the company doesn't pursue civil damages on top of the criminal charges." I looked at his face. The face of a man who had already won. And I understood for the first time exactly what had been happening for the past 6 months. I didn't sign anything. I stood up and walked out. I didn't have a plan. I didn't have a lawyer. I had less than $2,000 in savings after posting Donna's bail, a mortgage, and a daughter who was facing federal charges for buying her father a birthday present. What I had was time, and I intended to use it. The 2 weeks that followed were the worst of my life, and I say that as a man who buried his wife at 52. Donna was out on bail. I had taken a lien against the house to cover it, but she was a shell of herself. She sat at the kitchen table for hours without moving. Nursing school suspended her pending the investigation. The clinic let her go. She had done everything right her entire life, and now she was facing federal charges for buying her father a birthday present, and there was nothing I could say that made a dent in it. I couldn't find work. Nobody hires a 58-year-old logistics manager who's under federal investigation for theft of military technology. I sent out applications anyway, mostly to keep myself from sitting still. We ate cheap. We stopped answering the door. The neighbors who used to wave from their driveways now crossed to the other side of the street. A few friends stopped calling after the first week. Not all of them, but enough. I spent my nights going over the timeline, trying to find the crack in Patrick's plan. He had used my login credentials. Standard procedure for operations leads to share access with regional management, something I had done without thinking because it was policy. He had the digital logs, the corporate lawyers, and 6 months of carefully placed paper gaps pointing straight at me. His word against mine, and his word came with documentation. There was a night, I'll be honest about this, where I sat at the kitchen table at 2 a.m. and thought seriously about calling the public defender and telling him to work out a plea deal. Not because I was guilty, because I was tired. because watching Donna stare at the wall every day was worse than anything a judge could hand me. I thought, maybe if I take the fall, they leave her alone. I didn't make that call, but I thought about it. I want to be straight about that. 2 days after I walked out of Patrick's office, I was sitting on a bench at Goodale Park, just staring at the fountain, not thinking about much of anything. I heard footsteps on the gravel path. Someone sat down at the other end of the bench without saying anything. It was Marvin. He was in a hoodie, collar up, not looking at me directly. He spoke quietly, watching the park entrance like he was expecting someone to follow him. Patrick has cameras everywhere now, he said. Replace the whole night security team, his own people. I can't be seen talking to you. Then why are you here? He was quiet for a moment because I was on the receiving dock the day that military shipment came in, and I know what I saw. He told me the crates arrived light, significantly underweight. He had flagged it to the driver, who told him the regional director had already signed off on a blind receipt and instructed him not to run the weight check. Patrick had accepted empty crates knowingly and signed documentation saying the shipment was received in full. The equipment was never in the warehouse at all. Patrick hadn't stolen it from inside the building. He had taken it before it ever arrived, working with someone upstream in the supply chain. Columbus was just where the paperwork said it ended up. Then he used my credentials to build a digital trail, suggesting I had accessed the secure cage and pulled inventory that was never there to begin with. There's a printed email chain, Marvin said. I found it by accident 3 weeks ago when I was pulling maintenance records. It was filed into the wrong binder, sitting inside the Q3 maintenance logs in the basement archive. I didn't know what I was looking at then. I do now. Its correspondence between Patrick and a logistics supplier lays out the whole arrangement. Where is it now? Still in the archive room. But Roy, they're purging those files on Friday. Physical shred, everything in that basement goes. It was Wednesday evening. I had 36 hours. I want to be clear about what I did next. It was illegal. I broke into a building I had been formally banned from. I'm not going to dress it up as anything other than what it was. But I had a daughter at home who hadn't eaten a full meal in 2 weeks, and the legal system had nothing for me, and that email chain was the only thing standing between Donna and 10 years in a federal facility. Marvin agreed to prop the side fire exit open during the 3 a.m. shift, change a 4-minute window before the door locked again automatically. I wore my old work uniform and dark gloves. I knew every camera blind spot in that building because I had helped plan the security layout myself, years before Patrick ever showed up. I moved through the warehouse floor in the dark, staying low, keeping to the edges. The hum of the refrigeration units covered most of the sound. I reached the basement archive room, picked the lock with a tension wrench, an old hobby skill from my 40s that I never thought I'd use for something like this, and got inside in under 2 minutes. The Q3 maintenance logs binder was on the 3rd shelf. I pulled it down. The email chain was tucked inside the back cover, 4 pages printed, filed there by mistake. I read enough in the red filtered light to know it was real. Patrick Marsh and a supplier contact named D. Rafferty, laying out the arrangement in writing. Empty crates, falsified receiving documents, payments routed through a shell vendor account. I folded the pages and put them inside my jacket. Then the overhead lights blazed on. Patrick was standing in the doorway. 2 of his private security guards were behind him. He was holding a taser and wearing the look of a man who had been waiting for exactly this moment. I knew you'd come back, he said. Rats always do. He told me Marvin had been caught on camera propping the door. He told me the police were already on their way and that whatever happened next would be logged as resisting arrest. The guards moved in from both sides. I'm 58 years old. I'm not a fighter, but I had 4 pages of evidence in my jacket and a daughter at home who needed me to do something. I grabbed the heavy tape dispenser off the nearest desk and threw it hard at the fire alarm pull station on the wall. The glass cover shattered. Every alarm in the building went off at once. The sprinkler heads burst open and dirty water started pouring down across everything, the shelves, the floor, the lights. One of the guards slipped. I ran. Not for the exit, for the server room. I knew the layout. I hit the door at full speed, got inside, and threw the deadbolt behind me. The door was solid steel. It would hold for a few minutes, not more. I pulled out my phone, photographed all 4 pages. High resolution, multiple angles. Then I did the one thing Patrick hadn't planned for. I called the military liaison number that had been posted on the emergency contact board outside my office for 11 years. I had memorized it. The first month I started standard procedure for incidents involving military contracts. I had never used it before. "This is Roy Holt, Operations ID 4922, I said over the alarm. "I am inside the Columbus Logistics Hub. I have documentary evidence of contract fraud and theft of classified military assets by the site's regional director. I'm currently being held by private security. I need MPs." The door buckled on the second impact. The guards came through. The first baton hit my shoulder, and I went down. I pulled my knees to my chest and covered the pages with my body. The second strike never landed. A voice came over the facility PA, not the fire alarm, something separate, loud and flat and completely calm. "Federal agents, drop your weapons. Get on the ground now." The guards froze. I looked up from the floor. Patrick was visible through the server room door, already moving toward the loading area exit, trying to blend into the workers evacuating from the alarm. He made it about 12 feet. They took Patrick Marsh out of the building in zip ties. I watched it from the floor of the server room, my back against a rack of humming equipment, my shoulder throbbing where the baton had caught me. A federal agent crouched down next to me and asked if I needed a medic. I told him I needed to know if my daughter was going to be okay. He didn't answer that, not yet. What I didn't know that night, what they told me later, was how fast the military moves when their technology goes missing. The moment I called that liaison number and gave them my employee ID, and the words "classified military assets," a clock started running. They had people in the building within 23 minutes, not local police. Federal agents coordinating directly with the Department of Defense. Because the earbuds weren't just stolen equipment. They were prototype communications hardware with embedded tracking capability, and Patrick had been selling units to foreign buyers with the tracking data still active. That detail, the tracking information bundled with the hardware, had put the operation into a different category entirely. That's why they moved fast. That's why they were already watching the black market network that surplusgeardeals.com was part of. Donna hadn't just accidentally bought stolen earbuds. She had accidentally bought into the most recent chapter of a 2-year federal investigation. Columbus wasn't Patrick's first warehouse. The investigators confirmed that within 48 hours, he had run the same operation at 2 other distribution hubs in the Midwest before transferring to our facility. Different locations. Same structure. Establish control over receiving, falsify intake records, route inventory through shell vendor accounts, and when the paper gaps got too large to explain, redirect the trail toward a long-term employee with system access and a clean record. Someone whose credentials were already in the system, someone who had been asking questions. He had arrived at our facility 6 months before my birthday specifically because the previous location had gotten too risky. He needed a new site and a new fall guy. I was already on record sending emails about inventory discrepancies that made me useful to him. The 3 weeks that followed the arrest were the longest of my life, but they moved in the right direction. The printed email chain, combined with Marvin's sworn statement about the receiving dock weight discrepancy, gave the federal prosecutors enough to open the full financial investigation. Forensic accountants found Patrick's offshore accounts within the first week, 3 separate accounts across 2 jurisdictions, fed by payments from the shell vendor operation over 26 months. The total was significantly more than anyone at our facility had guessed. He hadn't just been stealing equipment. He had built an entire parallel business running alongside his legitimate salary. Donna's charges were dropped on a Tuesday morning 19 days after her arrest. I was sitting at the kitchen table when my phone rang. It was the district attorney's office. The DA got on the line personally. He told me the charges against Donna Holt were being dismissed with prejudice, meaning they couldn't be refiled. Then he said something I didn't expect. He said he was sorry. Not a legal apology, not a liability statement. Just a man on the phone telling me that his office had put my daughter through something she didn't deserve, and that he was sorry for it. I didn't say much. I thanked him and hung up. Then I went to Donna's room and knocked on her door and told her it was over. She didn't react the way I expected. She didn't cry, didn't yell. She just sat on the edge of her bed for a long moment, and then she said, "Okay," like she was allowing herself to believe it slowly, in pieces, instead of all at once. I understood that. That's how it felt on my end, too. Patrick Marsh pled guilty to 6 federal counts, including contract fraud, trafficking of restricted military technology, and conspiracy. The sentencing guidelines put him at 12 to 18 years. His private security guards, the 2 men who came through the server room door, were charged separately. Marvin had taken a beating the night I broke in. Patrick's people had caught him before the feds arrived, but he was okay. Bruised ribs, a cut above his eye. He testified anyway, showed up to give his statement in a pressed shirt with his army discharge papers in a folder, like he was reporting for duty. The company settled my wrongful termination claim for $85,000. I used $28,000 of it to pay off what was left of Donna's nursing school tuition. The rest went against the mortgage. I was offered my job back with a 15% raise and full back pay for the period I had been suspended. I turned it down. I couldn't walk back into a building that had let a man like Patrick operate for 6 months while I sent unanswered emails. Some things you can get past and some things you can't. That was one I couldn't. Marvin retired the same month. We get coffee on Tuesday mornings, a diner on Broad Street, same booth every week. We don't talk about that night much. We don't need to. There's an understanding between us that doesn't require words. The kind you build when you've been in a bad situation together and both came out the other side still standing. Donna finished her degree 4 months after the charges were dropped. She works in the ER now. She's good at it. Calm under pressure, clear-headed, doesn't flinch when things move fast. I wonder sometimes where she got that from, and I think it might have been her mother, and I think Carol would have been proud of how she handled all of it. Donna told me recently that the hardest part of the whole thing wasn't the arrest or the suspension or the weeks of waiting. It was believing for a while that the gift she had saved up 3 months to buy had been the thing that destroyed everything. I told her that was never true. The gift had nothing to do with it. She bought her father a pair of earbuds because she knew he liked listening to audiobooks on the bus and she wanted to do something kind. That was all she did. Everything else, the frame, the black market site, the fake listing, the tracked hardware, that was Patrick Marsh. He had built that trap long before Donna ever went looking for a birthday present. She just happened to be the one who found the right listing at the right time, because Patrick had made sure she would. We smashed the earbuds in the backyard the day after she came home. She swung a hammer first. I finished it. We didn't say anything while we did it. Didn't need to. I still think about the morning after the SWAT raid, standing in the police station parking lot before sunrise, not able to go in and not able to leave. I think about the night at the kitchen table when I almost made the call to accept a plea deal just to make the waiting stop. I think about Marvin showing up at that park bench when I had run out of moves. Here's what I learned from all of it. The system does not protect you automatically. It protects the people who built better documentation. It protects whoever got to the file cabinet first. The truth doesn't just come out on its own. Somebody has to go looking for it, usually at some cost to themselves, usually in the dark. Marvin paid a cost. I paid a cost. Donna paid a cost she never should have had to pay. But we're all still here. And Patrick Marsh has somewhere between 12 and 18 years to think about the fact that he picked the wrong family. The people who build their power by silencing honest men are counting on one thing, that you'll be too tired, too scared, or too alone to keep pushing back. The moment you stop giving them that, the whole thing unravels. If this story hit close to home, hit the like button. And if you know someone who's been blamed for something they didn't do, share this with them. They need to hear that it doesn't always end the way the powerful people plan it.